Hello there, AP World students. Let's continue learning about globalization with Part 2 Healthy Humans and an Unhealthy Planet. Between the years 1800 to the year 2000, the world population went from 1 billion to 7 billion people. And today it's actually getting pretty close to 8 billion. This is largely due to better food, or really better medicine and more reliable food. Interesting fact, the global population was at about 1 billion in the year zero as well. So between the year zero and the year 1800, hardly any population change occurred at all on planet Earth. And the big difference was the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution and medicine. Oh man, especially like vaccines and stuff, and I'll talk about those in a second. But what's going on now, however, though, is there is a concern that the world could become overpopulated. And I think I remember reading a pretty detailed scientific analysis that said if the world ever hit 25 billion people, we'd be in trouble. So if we're continuing on this, what is this, times 7 of our population every 200 years, we don't have that much more time. But thankfully, there are new forms of birth control, condoms, abortion, the morning after pill. They have been very effective at slowing global population growth and reducing the size of the average family. Birth control also allows women to be more consistent workers in the workplace, so it's definitely very much connected to women's liberation and the growing importance of women in society. It's estimated that the total global population will stabilize on planet Earth right around 12 billion people in the year 2200. So that's great. The rate of humans increasing on planet Earth is decreasing, and eventually it should flatten out if all the current global trends are correct. And the large reason why that is because the average woman today is having about 2 kids. And if the average woman has 2 kids, then the population will always stay constant, which is pretty awesome stuff. All right. So yeah, here's the estimates of where the world population could be by the year 2100. Some people are saying 7.3 billion, so even less than today. Some people are saying 15.6. I say you cut the estimates in half, and it's right around 12. So that would be pretty great. All right, moving on. So not only did the Industrial Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution start increasing the human population a lot in the 1800s, but in the 1900s, things got even better in the world of food production. And it's all this big event called the Green Revolution and industrial style farming. This shift happened in the 1960s through 1980s, and it involved genetically engineered crops and better strains of seeds. I know especially we made this genetically engineered version of rice that increased rice production in China by times 4. So China has 4 times the rice. They can have 4 times the people. But for so much of world history, starvation and malnutrition was the number one cause of death. Not anymore. Now people can get all kinds of food. The other kind of interesting thing about all the changes and advances with the Green Revolution is we've applied these all over the world, but we've especially applied them here in the United States. The United States is the number one producer of genetically engineered foods in the world. The United States has the most industrial style farms in the world. And if we wanted to, we could put the entire farming industry of the United States to work at 100%. We could provide enough food for 8 billion people on planet Earth. And there's not even 8 billion people on planet Earth. So if you really get technical, no one on planet Earth has to go hungry, but people still do go hungry today, and it largely has to do with international business and connecting people with the food. So it's really important to note that going hungry in the United States basically shouldn't happen. But some people, it still is a trouble anyway. So, all right, moving on. All right, now let's talk about health. So Edward Jenner invented vaccines in the late 1700s, but only in the 1900s was there an international commitment to vaccinate the world and eradicate some of the world's deadly diseases. Famously, smallpox and polio were eradicated during this time. Here's a picture of a little girl affected by polio. It largely makes your joints not work anymore, and usually it affected kids. Here's a picture of a kid with smallpox. This is a terrible disease. It killed roughly 30% of the people who it infected and 10% of all humans who ever lived. But both of those diseases are gone today. They have been eradicated through the wonders of vaccination. So we'll never worry about smallpox or polio again. It's pretty amazing stuff because that affected so many kids throughout the entirety of world history. And other vaccines help people with diseases which caused global life expectancy to go way up. Yeah, vaccines don't help the dead. Vaccines help you from not being dead. That's what I should have written. Vaccines. Big fan, kids. Especially in the year 2021, makes me feel like we could finally return to normal. So, making it happen. All right, here's some current health concerns, though. Medical advances from the late 1800s through 1900s affected many diseases in the world known as poverty diseases, and most of these diseases are found in the southern hemisphere and kind of the developing part of the world. Talking about malaria, tuberculosis, cholera, Ebola, and HIV/AIDS. Here's a mosquito putting malaria into somebody. Oh God, mosquitoes are the worst. But all of these diseases, there are modern medicines that maybe they don't cure these diseases, but they make the disease significantly less deadly. And the thing is, though, that not everybody in the developing world has access to reliable medicine and a quality hospital. So these diseases are still killing a lot of people today. But we've seen, we've got plans, and the World Health Organization is helping. So people are getting more and more access to hospitals, and these poverty diseases, I think, will be less of a concern as world history continues. But the current medical concerns are diseases known as longevity diseases. This is kind of what medical research is especially looking at right now, talking about ways to solve heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's. All three of these diseases are common as people age. Humans typically don't live till they're 100 years old, and usually once you get around that age, one of these three things is going to catch up to you and put your life on a downward slope. But I'm confident that modern medicine will come up with some cures and ways to address these concerns to help people live their best lives they possibly can. All right, moving on. So, a more interconnected world does lead to new disease exposures. So this is definitely another negative of globalization because, as Christopher Columbus famously showed us, he connected the European world to the American world for the first time, and the big unintended consequence was he brought smallpox to the Native Americans. But what this means, though, is in our super connected globalized world, for example, a guy in Wuhan, China could eat a bat, and then suddenly that causes a global pandemic that basically shuts down the global economy for more than a year. Just saying. The COVID-19 absolutely applies to this slide. The more relevant historical example for this class is the 1918 influenza pandemic. By all accounts, it was just kind of the normal flu, but for undisclosed reasons, in 1918, the flu was super duper bad, and it killed a huge amount of people on planet Earth. It killed more people in that disease than people who died in World War I. So, and these pandemics wouldn't happen, or they'd at least be a lot slower, if there wasn't so much travel and there wasn't so much interaction around the world. I don't think this is a reason to stop world travel and to stop world trade, but it is a concern with more interconnectedness in the world, more likeliness of spreading diseases faster than ever before. Okay, moving on. Energy technology. Yeah, this is another really important concept. So the energy technology of petroleum energy that happened in the Second Industrial Revolution, but then also nuclear energy, which is something that became a thing during the Cold War, this technology is now spreading all over the world. And it allows for people to have much more efficient access to electricity than ever before. And so many parts of the developing world are building these brand new cities to accommodate new factories, provide people with new jobs, and they also want to have cheap energy. So nuclear plants are being built in certain parts of the world. Let's hope they build them better than the Soviets did. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, big parts of Africa and Asia today, they're getting access to this cheap, more effective energy. But also, these cities are growing so quickly that people are moving into the city. They don't have anywhere to live, so they build squatter settlements. They build these kind of houses made out of leftover materials. I mean, here's a bunch of houses made out of, I think, shipping containers. Here's some houses made out of basic brick, but next to like a really fancy apartment house. And a lot of these cities do have unnecessary pollution and waste. And if our whole goal is to build a better world, we definitely got to do more to plan out the most effective cities possible, especially where cities are growing the fastest, which is in the developing world. All right, so now let's talk about some more problems with our planet, because this is healthier people, but an unhealthier world. Deforestation is a huge problem. Reduction of forests around the world, especially the Amazon rainforest. Brazil continues to cut back the Amazon rainforest every year, especially because the current president of Brazil wants to expand agricultural farmland. Brazilians really like eating beef. I mean, look, I'm a big fan of Brazilian steakhouses. And where are all those cows going to graze? Well, cut down the rainforest, get more grazing land for the cows. Another huge problem in our planet is desertification. It's the decline of farmland and the expansions of deserts. This is especially happening in China and northern Africa. And kind of a cool solution to this problem is that these deserts, I mean, with global climate change and with there being less moisture in most years, deserts continue to grow and to kind of take over land that was once good farmland. So what they're doing in Africa is they decided to plant this wall of trees across the entire continent. They're calling it the Great Green Wall. And so this is kind of what it's designed to do. It's supposed to sort of stop the spread of the desert. And here's some of the trees they're planting there. So it'll hopefully prevent the Sahara Desert from growing and taking over more of the continent. So I think it's a great idea. I know China's doing something like this as well. I don't know if it's also called the Great Green Wall, but good on them. All right. Global climate change. I referenced this a little bit in the last slide, but as humans burn more oil, natural gas, and coal is the worst, by the way, the amount of CO2 steadily increases in the world's atmosphere, and the world becomes hotter. With a hotter world, weather becomes more erratic, polar ice caps melt, which causes rising in sea levels. This is a pretty major concern. And always I hear kind of a changing number. You know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tells you that we have like 10 years until climate change more or less ends the world. Some scientists say it's 200 years. It's hard to say the when this is going to be when the result of all this will really affect us terribly, but it's a concern that absolutely needs to be addressed on our planet. And I'll tell you, kids, a way you could solve climate change is you just turn off everybody's car, you turn off everybody's gas plant, you turn off everybody's every single thing that creates emissions, and within not a terribly long amount of years, the climate will return to normal. But the problem is that the global economy doesn't want to shut any of that off. And actually, ever since we started to talk about climate change in the 1990s, not only are we not doing less climate disruptions, we're actually doing more climate disruptions than ever before. Every year, we've increased CO2 in the atmosphere at a faster rate. So maybe it's just slowing the rate down. But I don't want to get into a huge climate change discussion on this slide. It's a concern that we gotta consider in our planning of the future of this planet. Okay, and actually, this one's kind of an interesting one. There have been so many times in history where people said, oh, the world's going to run out of coal in so many years, or oh, the world's going to run out of oil in so many years. And then, the biggest threat to planet Earth is climate change, and that one can still be debated. But I'm prepared to argue that a huge threat to planet Earth is actually a lack of fresh water. And water is needed for everything, kids. And I can show you here that this is a map of planet Earth, and it looks like in most of the developed world, water isn't that bad. But in the parts of planet Earth that are growing the fastest, parts of Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of South Asia, water is already pretty scarce. So water's gonna be a problem. You need water for everything. You need it, of course, for drinking, but you also need it for farming, plumbing, and factories. Factories really use a lot of water. Like here in the United States, 59% of our fresh water is consumed by our factories and industry. That's way more than you'd ever expect. Factories need tons of it. And I'm prepared to argue that of all the resources on planet Earth that we're at a risk of running out of, fresh water is the most pressing concern. We do have the technology to turn salt water into fresh water, but it uses a ton of energy and it's really inefficient, and it wouldn't help most people around the world in its current state. So if you kids want to really put your brains to how to save the world in the future, doing something to address the fresh water concerns, I think, is pretty major. All right, moving on. Oh yeah, what did I say here? Future wars will be fought over water rights. That is true for sure. All right, overfishing. Yeah, this is another big concern. Every year we're taking out more fish from the ocean than we're putting back in. So over time, I think a lot of our fish friends are there's not gonna be enough fish in the ocean, and there's plenty of people on planet Earth that get a good amount of their protein from fish. So gotta address that problem on our planet. And to counter a whole lot of these points I've made, overfishing, desertification, climate change, there's this organization called Greenpeace that's founded to combat environmental damage to our planet. And it's just people all over the world. It's one of these international organizations saying, like, unite, save the planet, fight back. So Greenpeace, get it. All right. And pressure from environmentalists like Greenpeace is one of the major reasons why factories moved out of the United States in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And they just, the Greenpeace people celebrated. They said, yay, no more factories in America. We've saved planet Earth. And over the last 30 years, America has become a more environmentally friendly place. There's less pollution in America. So all these environmentalists give themselves high fives. But the thing that I'm kind of discouraged about is they didn't have a global outlook on the issue. Because yes, the factories moved out of the United States, but they just moved right into China. And China used to be a very environmentally friendly place, a bunch of people hanging out on rice fields, giving each other high fives. But today, China is now an industrial wasteland. China has so much pollution. There's so much crap going into the atmosphere. China is the worst polluter in the world. And we could have a whole conversation about the Paris Climate Accords, talk about what it does to address global warming. But the Paris Climate Accords gives China a free pass to pollute the world for the next 20 years. How are we going to stop climate change if China's just chugging coal straight into the atmosphere? Okay, you got to think in a whole world perspective. And yes, it's, I guess, good that there were less factories in America, but you didn't solve the problem. You just moved it to the other side of the planet. Ugh. Yeah, and Asia's air quality is terrible. Like, I was watching this air quality index the other day, and India was so bad. And yeah, India's getting a lot of new factories too. I remember when I lived in South Korea, there was, I think it was around March every year, there was something called the yellow dust season, where just all this yellow gunk just covered everything out in the streets. And I asked my Korean friends about it, and they're like, oh yeah, this time of the year, this is a bunch of stuff from Chinese factories that blows over the Yellow Sea and even coats Korea in a bunch of industrial waste. And I was just amazed by that. I was like, no way. But yeah, and I mean, this picture shows you right here. The red is where there's the worst air pollution in the world, and it's really, really bad in Asia. So If we want to save planet Earth, we got to do something about this. All right, and I've got a special Prezi where I fully analyze the United Nations. I probably go deeper into this Prezi than I should, but I encourage you to check it out, learn something about the United Nations, because that's a big part of the AP World curriculum for this unit as well. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing me do my AP World thing. This is my final time. Peace out.